water damage, huge issue in the market. We'll continue to move on this aspect, manage the risk as much as possible. I'm sure it's a huge discussion point. Water damage, whose responsibility for it, why does it happen, why is flat number 1 paid when flat number 47 has flooded his house. It's difficult because you can't go into everyone's premises and make sure when they're on holiday they turn the taps off, make sure that the water's off. It's a difficult one. Your excess on the policy for a building might mean that a lot of these claims aren't paid for. Flat number 2 is flooded, there's £800 worth of damage, but you've got £1,000 excess. It wasn't flat number 2's fault, it was flat number 8's fault. Who pays for it? As far as the insurance is concerned, they put their hands up and say it's less the excess, sort it out yourselves. You can't take a policy on the building that'll cover individual premises. The building is the building as a whole. It's almost so.
Which will insure the excess. Like me, we have an excess of 2,500.
Right.
So if upstairs floods me, I would obviously be liable for that. Sorry, well, they would be liable if they don't pay. I end up paying. But
yeah.
Can I insure that £2,500 excess?
No. No. You're almost stuck with. There's nothing you can do. It is you pay or they pay. And then that comes back down to the problem with an insurance policy. It's not that it may change and people are looking at it to change it, but as it stands, the building covers the building, and the building policy assumes that your roof and flat 8's walls and flat 15 are all one and the same, so it gets paid by one and the same. It's something that probably the management company itself has to address with the residents, and whether that be the insurance policy is X amount, it's split this way, we're going to take an extra £20 off everybody else, and then that goes in a bit of a fighting fun pot, and if there is a water damage and we don't want to make a claim, we use that pot to pay for the money, to pay for the damage. It's a difficult one because you could be building up a lot of money and the same people could be having it, and people, well, I'm not going to leave my taps on. Or it is difficult, but unfortunately there isn't a policy out there that will.
So you can't insure the excess.
You can't insure the excess, and it must be frustrating as a resident, because probably a lot of the time you say, well, I've got damage, it's below the excess, and it's somebody else who's caused the damage.
Well,
the insurance
policy. It's the cost of claims we have apart from the roof.
Yeah.
The warehouse.
The water damage.
The water damage.
So as it's currently, how do you manage that? Is it?
Well, our agent, he sources finds out where the source is, and if it's from the general water system in the building, it's claimed for. If it's somebody's plumbed in a washing machine or something in their flat has burst with the system, or a heater, water heater,
yeah,
then they get the claim goes against them.
Against them.
Yeah, because it's their maybe their as you would at home, if your washing machine bursts, you don't really you can claim, can't you? You can claim on your own insurance then, but they'd have to have contents insurance really.
Yeah, is that regardless of fault or non-fault? Some pipes just go sometimes. The back of the washing machine pipe burst off. It wasn't their fault. It flooded. Do they still have to pay?
I think it was decided that each case would be treated on its own merits.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you can't legislate for your boiler exploding.
Exactly. Yeah.
In which case, that would be considered. If it was just sort of negligence.
Yeah, left the tap running or the bath running.
People have put in their own. They've done their own plumbing. For instance,
right.
That is a clear case that.
Yeah.
If they put in a shower and they've done it themselves, or they've had a mate round to do it, then
yeah.
it's got to be them.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. What would be, like you say, if you can insure individually your excess,
yeah,
it would be. It would help a lot.
Yeah.
But for something like that, you can almost do that yourself by self-insuring. You could go to all the residents and say, right, we will put a policy together. It's not a policy, but it's you paying £25 per month, and that covers you for, if there's a water damage not covered by you, this will pay for it. You only would pay a premium to an insurance policy to pay for that. So you could almost set something up yourselves to say, we'll put something in. If you want to be involved in that, you can. If not, I think the problem that a residents association is going to have is that when is it a fault and when is it not a fault? I put my own washing machine in, it was fine when I put it in. Well, it was your fault, you should have got someone professional in. Well, it could have happened when it was someone professional in.
Yeah.
If your 4-year-old son turns the taps on, and is that your fault? You're going to end up in dispute because one will get paid when you think it shouldn't have, and one won't get paid when it possibly couldn't have, and then some flat 5 speaks to flat 8 and says, well, mine never got paid, and that's why possibly just having a block, it's not covered, it doesn't matter what, or everyone pays £25 in per month, and we pay for the damage.
Can I just come in
Depends.
there? I think that's a really important issue. The whole question of water leaks is in every single development, and it's the greatest call on our insurance claims that we have, and our excess goes up every year. In terms, Gary mentioned before that it's about managing the risk. So we've produced a policy document that we've given to every leaseholder, which looks at what our responsibilities are under the lease. And then we give a whole series of recommendations for checking on a regular basis your apartment to look for leaks. And that did bring our insurance claims down because we were seen to be managing the risk. But I think there's a number of things coming out of this that's worth, I mean, I'm going to ask Ben if he wants to make a comment on this as well, because the managing agents obviously deal with this on a daily basis. But what you've just suggested there sounds like a really good idea. Do you think you could put that into some kind of proposal that we might all look at on one level? This where everybody voluntarily puts in and there's a bit of a pot, because you're going back on yourself almost by saying, well, it would depend how you determine fault, etc. But you don't want someone to recommend that this is a good, robust policy and this is how you determine fault and this is what's reasonable, which we wouldn't really be capable of doing.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, I think that's an interesting. The other is, I thought for a long time that I think I mentioned this to yourself when we had our meeting with Andy, that we probably need to arrange a kind of a conference or a seminar for everybody who manages and lives in apartments to look at water leaks and insurance, because there are devices out there now which you can have put in your premises, which as soon as there's an excess of water, it cuts off the water supply. And that will bring down the excess as well as the premium. So I'm wondering whether we shouldn't look at putting something together with, managing agents, with the insurance industry, just to bring some experts to Liverpool to look at the whole question of water leaks. And I'm sure I can see Alistair still there taking it. But it's the kind of thing that probably RSLs would be interested in as well, because this affects everybody, doesn't it? So I do think it's an issue that, is more than we can handle this morning. But I'd like to see us, if everybody felt it was appropriate, to flag this issue up and see where we could actually take it. Maybe engage and come back and bring a few people together to put something like this on.
Yeah, we can definitely speak to insurers to see what their take is and what they're thinking about doing moving forward. Obviously, policies evolve all the time. You hear a lot about renting and people moving into rented premises, so more and more landlords are vulnerable in the policies, and we've got a specific property owners team which just deal with property owners because it's increased so much over the last few years. And I'm sure insurers will be looking at a way of managing the leak side, and it could well be that you can buy an individual policy to cover it, but again, that individual policy is only going to pay you to then make a recovery claim off the person who's it started from. So ultimately, they might pay for your damage, but the insurance company is going to say, well, it wasn't your fault, it was their fault, so we'll go after them.
Yeah.
So you're then opening another can of worms to say, okay, I've got mine done, but then you've got a solicitor's letter going to flat above saying you owe us £1,500 for damage you've caused, and then it just pushes it onto them. So maybe the the managing it.
Like car insurance though, isn't it? You know, so if you can do it for cars, you should be able to do it for leaks.
Yeah, but I mean, insuring your excess on a vehicle insurance. Yeah, no.
I don't know, you know.
Yeah,
obviously
no,
that's-
it's not something that would be common, or
Yeah.
Do that on a higher car, don't you?
yeah, well, yeah, you collision, yeah,
That's like
your
a
waiver,
yeah.
your waiver type
So
of
obviously
policy.
there's a mechanism there to do it, but it just hasn't been done.
It should, yeah, but again, it's definitely is obviously a can of worms which is going to rumble on. But again, I think it'll probably come back to, you'll find that the majority of people are quite good within their own homes and they check things. You only need a couple. You only need a couple that don't, and you find it's the same people because they're less interested. So.
Before we move on to the next point, can I just invite Ben to say something from a managing agent's perspective on the water leaks question?
All I'd say is that possibly 80% plus of claims against our policy are to do with water leaks, escape of water from one flat to another. It is a massive problem, and the difficulty is that communally you're responsible for communal plumbing, and yet most leaks arise from plumbing that is the responsibility of an individual leaseholder, and it's therefore can't be about anything more than cajoling and persuading individual leaseholders to get their individual plumbing checked and to make sure that's okay. And as Jerry says, there are now shut-off valve devices on the market that can shut water off immediately in the case of a leak. But again, that's down to individual leaseholders to have those fitted. That can't be done communally because you can't use service charges to deal with individuals' plumbing that is the responsibility of an individual leaseholder. So, regrettably, I can only exasperate the problem rather than give you solutions. It is a big problem, and it's a very, very difficult one to try and address, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think the first thing that would probably happen is that you will get a contents policy for a flat owner, which will cover water damage and resultant water damage. So there's a potential that as a flat owner, you could then cover your damage and the resultant water damage. You're then relying on individuals to take that policy and take that extended cover and pay for it themselves, which it's not always likely or necessarily that they will do that. So I think that's probably the first policy that someone might look at. But as an insurer, what you don't want to do is put something in which you know is going to cause to you paying more out, so they don't put it in.
It's going to be cost prohibitive anyway.
Exactly. So it's happened for years now. It's going to continue to happen, but all an insurer is going to do is pay a little bit more premium for getting more claims in, for having to deal with more claims, and ultimately to having to pay more money out. So it's probably, like Jerry says, discussing it with an insurer who can write a policy and who can amend a policy and who can put something forward for that. As a broker, we've got a lot of clout with insurers, so we will have a conversation with Zurich, who are our property owner specialists, and see what's in the pipeline for that. I'll report
And
back.
I will make sure we have the conversation with Gary
That would be really
and Andy
helpful.
to see where this goes. And so, can I suggest we move on
Yeah.
from this subject?